Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Quantum Conversation Show, empowering communities and elevating leadership. In our show, we'll be interviewing people from right across the strata sector to provide you with various tips and tools to assist you with creating vibrant and connected residential communities that you're proud to call home. I'm Michael Darby, founder and CEO of the Quantum Group, and today it's my pleasure to have a conversation with David Lipshut. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Michael.
David's dedicated 8 years on various communities he's been involved with. He was a former committee member and the chairperson of a committee within a large master plan residential community, and also on a committee within a medium high-rise project in the CBD. Through his time on the committee, David provided steadfast leadership and a wealth of knowledge, guiding the committee through both challenges and achievements. We've asked David on the show to share his insights on effective community governance, the qualities essential for successful committee involvement, and valuable advice for those considering and stepping into a committee role. His experience will provide a unique perspective to support and inspire current and future committee members. Again, thanks, David, for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation, Michael. And I must say I applaud the initiative to help educate people who join this sector in a role of committee. And I hope to be able to help others in the future.
Fantastic. So we'll start off with a few general questions. What is your view on the importance of committee's role in a large community?
Well, I think the role of a committee is as a representative of all the lot owners. So therefore you are representing everybody individually, collectively, as a committee. So the role, it's important, is that you represent their views, not your own views. Yeah. And those views are to manage the place properly and responsibly.
Yeah. What do you feel is the main function of a committee?
The committee should allow lot owners to relax and enjoy their property. That's what the committee, I think, should have an objective of. And it does that knowing that the estate has been well run and knowing that the issues are being resolved in a sensible way.
It is challenging with committees being volunteer members, isn't it? When they're sitting on committees, that adds some difficulty with that role, doesn't it? That's not a paid role. They're doing it out of the goodness of their heart.
And one must recognise that, and I actually talk about that later. But the importance of the unique aspect of OCs is that the committee makes decisions on behalf of others, but it's not just others, it's their neighbours. Yeah. So therefore the repercussions of a decision reflect on the people you're going to see on a day-by-day basis. So it's not like a board which may make a decision and never see the shareholders. We actually live amongst other people whose decisions make. So we want people, the importance of residents. We want people who have first-hand knowledge of that estate, and we want diversity of opinions, but also an appreciation of the impact of decisions, good or bad, but they need to understand that. And only residents can truly bring those thinking processes to a committee.
Yeah, I think the challenges we come across with new committee members is recognising that they might have their personal views on matters, but like we touched on earlier around the fiduciary duty, it's very challenging for them to, yes, I've got a personal view, but when I'm making these decisions, they need to be in the best interest of the whole community. That can be challenging for committee members.
Absolutely. Seen it alive and true on two committees that I sit on, sat on. And when someone comes to a committee with a personal objective, it becomes pretty obvious pretty quickly, in which case their role on the committee is diminished, the cohesiveness of the committee is reduced, and the effectiveness of the committee is challenged. So I think that anybody who is actually thinking that I'll get on a committee to get my way, that's probably not a good thing.
Yeah. Look, and that's how through Quantum, I think it was 4 years ago, we set up a committee recruitment induction program. We proactively reach out to the whole community through information sessions we run, gauging interest on joining the committee, explaining to people what their role is on the committee, and they've got that fiduciary duty, trying to filter through, and get the right people to serve on the committee, just to help the committee hit the ground running with the right members. It's the effort we're making, and they have interviews with committee members. So they really get to know before they start what's involved, so you can get the best results when you're on the committee.
And certainly when I was chair, I was encouraging for people to join the committee as well and would meet with them. And some would continue the process, but some misinterpreted their role as, getting something that they wanted. and would bail out.
Yeah.
So the role of a committee member, I think, is one has to be one of sharing, but also bringing expertise and skills to a committee.
I guess another option that's come to mind on reaching out to residents to get them on the committee is working groups that we've both set up and worked with, which works well. They're not a part of the committee, but it provides opportunities for people who have a specific interest, whether it's around landscaping or finance. They can sit on that working group without being on the committee and provide value and get to know what it's like. It could be a breeding ground for committee members, can't it?
We did use working groups, and that was effective certainly for garden propagation and social events and things like that. There were working groups, and they were normally chaired by someone on the committee, but most of the members weren't on the committee.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is a useful adjunct to a formal structure. It means that a committee has another party to which it can delegate a task.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, sharing the activities and sharing the responsibilities is a good thing to do.
Sharing the workload.
Sharing the workload,
Indeed.
yes.
What did you enjoy most when you were serving on a committee?
I enjoyed the interactions that I had with people, positive and negative, and you understand that. But I think that the thing about being on a committee is to see an outcome that benefits all. And that's what it's driven me through my career, and still drives me, is to do something that in fact might not be easy, might not be obvious, but when it's done, people say, well, that was a good idea, and get a good outcome. Yeah. That's what drives me.
Yeah. And that comes back to, you're doing it for a personal agenda, or you're doing it to serve the wider community. What aspect you bring to it makes a big difference.
You have to bring the wider community aspect. Yeah. And I think the corollary to that is that if you bring your personal one, you'll probably be clouded in your judgment.
Yeah.
And that is another aspect that will become pretty obvious from your other co-committee members. They will see this, and they will then, the respect for that person's opinion will diminish.
Yeah. And look what we've found with the first committee meeting format that we've got, that there's a lot that we work through, and expectations of being on the committee, the expectations of the manager, the fiduciary duty, and those people often disappear after the first meeting because they know this isn't the place for my personal agenda to work through.
We didn't have that. I mean, we had people who glazed over, I think, with some of that stuff.
Yeah.
But what I think the best way to run the roles of the chair is to make sure that the committee is considering things in a holistic way and a non-biased way, and with an outcome in mind. Yeah. And that's, I think, an aspect that is important. But there's the legalities of an owner's corporation, and we need to reflect and respect those. Yeah. But most people join a committee because they live there and they think, oh, this might be way of getting something done.
Yeah. And the flip side is it could be a good social event. We don't want that either. It's nice to catch up, but after 2 bottles of red wine, meetings can get misguided, can't they?
We rarely had the wine at the OC, and I think that's a good idea. But others I know,
for those at home, and what not to do.
Yes,
make sure they're not social. They're not social.
It's
gatherings.
not a social, no, but it's collegiate rather than social. In other words, you're working towards a common outcome together.
Yes.
Socialisation happens outside.
Indeed. What was one of the key challenges that you worked through and reached a good outcome on when you're working as a committee member?
You've sort of touched on it. OC committees have a diversity of membership, and they have opinions on different topics coming from different perspectives. At times, talking with a member can resolve a problem outside of the committee meeting, but sometimes it just can't. So the challenge that's always is to do what one believes is right for the whole community, by hell or high water, frankly.
Yeah.
And that can be challenging at times. There have been moments where we've had robust discussions, if you will, in the committee and outside of the committee at AGMs, and they're useful to a degree. But the challenge is to reach an outcome that is acceptable to the wider community.
Yeah.
You can't please all the people all the time.
Yeah. Is there other ways you could tease out around that engagement with those members to get the best outcomes, but it might be outside of the meetings or
it's normally outside. I mean, through my career, I ran lots of steering committees and things like that. And the meeting itself should be a decision-making forum or for last questions. The idea, I think, of a good preparation for a meeting is to meet beforehand and give people the opportunity to discuss any concerns they've got, and then to bring that to the committee in a sensible, focused way. Yeah. The other aspect is that I found that a lot of people don't want to have their name attached to a certain matter. in which case I would offer that up as myself. I would just talk about a member has raised the following items,
Sure.
and then the committee could then discuss without having knowledge. And often there was a member of the committee who would raise it, but they just didn't want to be the person seen to sponsor it.
Sure.
So I think that the consultation and the talking before the meeting, making the topic real and making it a clear topic for the committee, not for a member of the committee, is an important aspect.
Yeah. Look, I guess just exploring that a bit further, something that we do that you're aware of for our committees, we're all about providing as much information, documentation up front for the committee members.
I do talk about that later.
Hoping they read it.
I do support that, and I talked about that as being one of the critical success factors of an owner's corporation manager.
Yeah.
But the critical thing you just mentioned is as long as they read it.
Yeah.
So normally not everybody reads it. Normally few read it.
Yeah.
You pick your members who are good on the basis of that.
Yeah.
What I used to do is give a short summary and take it as read.
Yeah.
And of course, the problem
did
with
that well. Yes.
The problem with that is that you sometimes get a decision made that they may not have fully bought into if they had actually had the time. But you can't. You're working with a volunteer group. You talked about it. They've got other lives. You can't expect them to be as involved and engaged as the chair normally should be, and certainly not as the manager. But you've got to get an outcome still.
Yeah. So part of that, we will prepare information papers,
yes,
and decision papers, and that come from the whole aspect of members would get upset if meetings go too long, and so we prepare as much information as we can. So the members, again, let's anticipate they're going to read the documentation. They're coming to the meeting well informed, and you're going to have a robust, great discussion off the bat, and then get a decision that's well considered. So we provide the information papers, which is obviously a discussion item and is not for decision, and decision papers. More importantly in that scenario, that people have got some information, can understand it, and think through those issues, so that they can have a good discussion, get good outcomes at the committee meetings. How did you find they worked in the committee environment, having those types of papers and information for committee
Absolutely
members?
critical. I mean, I with the current committee, we're not having many of those things, and so I actually write emails to the various parties saying, I don't understand this. How can I make a decision about it? So there is the need for this process. And I think the information paper is something that is maybe big or spans a number of meetings to make it to reach a decision. And a decision paper should be focused.
Yes.
And I think those two documents should be short, should be focused, and should be read.
Yeah.
And if that happens, the meeting will run better.
Yeah, indeed. Not all companies are doing it, but something that we have come across that's worked really well that we're getting great feedback from. So volunteer motivation, what do you believe the best ways to motivate and retain residents for committees, especially in communities where participation is low?
Well, I think participation is low in many OCs. You look at the Act and you talk about, minimum of 3 members, and some places have trouble getting 3 members, and I hear about those. I've not had that trouble. Where we're at the moment, we've got 7 members, and at the previous one we had 10 members. So that's not been my challenge. If it were, then the question, of course, about people giving up their social time for something else, it means relevance and effectiveness. So therefore, it would be a matter of identifying people or spreading the word that this is an important aspect where we're making decisions on behalf of everybody, and we value diversity of opinion and skills. But you can't force someone onto a committee. And if you do, they won't be there for long.
Yeah. I think if they're well run, you're more likely to have some success, because the community is talking about it's enjoyable and they're getting great outcomes. I'd like to participate in that. Or if it's high conflict and it's toxic, people are going to stay away from it.
And I've got friends who are involved with both of that. I mean, mine were we had moments of toxicity, but normally it was okay. But I have others who they've got 10 people in the apartment block and it's just a nightmare.
Yeah.
And they've still got to make their decisions, and they've still got to live with it, and they've still got to answer the neighbour who's next door. So I think with regard to encouraging people onto a committee, the key aspect there is they've got to want to do it.
Yeah.
And press ganging doesn't work. So when people avoid going to the AGM because they don't want to get on, that's probably not a good sign. Yeah. But I think at the end of the day, as you said, a well-run collegiate, it shouldn't be necessarily fun, but it should be useful and outcome. And of course, the person's background will have an impact on that. Yeah. If they've never been in involved with making decisions or committees and things like that, then they'll probably find that as more of a barrier. But then we've had people like that, and they just wanted to be involved for the social aspects or something like that. Oh, that's one other aspect I talk about committees, is having a diversity of those who do and those who help.
Yeah.
And so if we've got a committee where there are maybe 3 or 4 who do, then the others can bring their opinions and consultation with other members of the community and things like that, and have a less onerous role.
Yeah. People bring different skill sets, don't they?
They do. Mm. They do. I mean, the skill sets of people are is important. Yeah. And you know, one of the things is that a chair can't be precious. I mean, if you've got an idea that it doesn't fly with the others, you just got to let it go. Yeah. I have heard of chairs who push through everything that they have as their idea, and I think that's a recipe for disaster.
Not a good functioning committee.
Not a good functioning committee, no.
We might go to chairperson, because you did serve for a number of years, which is a critical role amongst committees. So a few questions around that. What do you see as the top 2 or 3 tips, I guess, in your experience for a chairperson of an owners corporation committee to ensure that their committee gets the best outcomes for their community?
Well, 6 years as chair was a good run.
Yeah.
And so I think I've thought about the question of, and the top 3. I think the first one is seek counsel. I mean, ideally one has 1 or 2 other members of the committee that one can go to and just have the chat about a topic or an item or an issue before you get into to help you form your view and form your opinion. And I did quite a lot, bouncing ideas or issues off others. I never made a decision outside of meeting without getting 1 or 2 other members to agree to it. And that's that aspect whereby you've got people who have different opinions or different views, different ways of thinking about the same item. Yeah. So I think discussion and having that allows that, having had that pre-conversation, allows the committee meeting then to be focused. You can actually talk to the matters, the items of that topic that matter, that might be contentious. And also to get an inclusive and an outcome, because I was always outcome focused. No point having long discussions. That's a waste of time. But you need to have discussions to allow people to become informed. Listening to others was an aspect of the seeking counsel, is that you don't always get the advice you want, but you still got to take it on board. Yeah. And for those who are sensible and acting in the interests of the OC, that's what makes the chair's life easier. Is
there a certain trick to that around making sure, again, you might have a conversation with an acting chairperson, for example, before the committee, just to bounce off and explore your thoughts behind an issue. But when you get into the committee environment, trying to make sure you bring others into that conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's not just a role, it'll be a matter of someone who has an opinion about it, either pro or against. I mean, through my consulting career, I always wanted to have an antagonist and a protagonist to meet with, because then you get the whole thing to think about. Yeah. If all you get is people who say yes, it really isn't effective. Yeah. So you need to actually find a bit of that tension. Yeah. Okay. And I had people on the committee who knew I would get that from, so that was always handy. Yeah, that was the first tip. Yeah. The second tip is maybe a little bit arrogant. It's lead. I mean, a voluntary group with diversity of skills, ideas, and approaches can wander off. So therefore, without leadership, meetings could be unproductive, and that's something that I did not want to have. Yeah. But lead in a way that the views of others can be heard and collective decisions are made. Yeah. So that's the fine line. Yeah. Never be afraid to be rolled as the chair.
So roll. Someone disagrees with your view.
If I had a position that I thought was a good idea, and others thought not, let it go. Yeah. You know, just don't push and don't hold up. One time, I'll give you an example. I thought it'd be a good idea to know more about our community and conduct a census. Well, I got rolled on that. I still think it's a good idea, but it was not done. So, I mean...
You have to swallow your pride.
Yeah, sometimes. Leadership is not dictatorship.
Yes.
So I think that's the second aspect that I had there.
That's an important tip, because people can have the ego can take over sometimes.
Yes.
When they appoint a chairperson, I think that comes with more powers than others, and it doesn't. They lead the meeting. They don't control the decision making.
Yep. And I always thought to myself, it's just an owner's corporation. I know it's your business, but it's not worth dying over a ditch on this. It's you've got to live with your customer, with your client, with your neighbours, and you've got to actually live with yourself. So
indeed,
And the third tip I'd have is work with the manager. So that was the one that I thought, that ebbs and flows, as you know. But the chair of an OC cannot, indeed should not, be expected to manage the OC.
Yeah.
That's not their job. And this is the job of the OC manager. So this means communicating clearly, setting priorities, keeping on top of activities being performed by the owner's corporation manager. If this is not done, the operation of the OC and indeed the committee may fail to meet the expectations of the members, in which case we've all lost out.
Yeah.
So it's a collegiate activity. And, sometimes we would be stressed and strained because some things needed to be done and I thought they should be done. But at the end of the day, it can't be done by one or the other. It needs both.
Yes.
And so working with the manager is my third tip.
Yeah. We'll probably explore that a little bit further on as well and go a bit deeper with that. But just sitting with some more chairperson questions, what advice would you as a previous chairperson give to new and prospective committee members about the approach needed to be effective on a committee? I guess you mentioned a couple of them.
Yeah.
Well,
my first one is read the papers.
Indeed, yeah.
So see the head of the committee meetings and become informed.
What problems does that cause when they don't read the papers?
I've had situations whereby someone will ask silly questions that are, I would simply say, well, that's in the paper. That's in the paper. I wouldn't answer it. I'd just say that's in the paper to highlight to the others that this person clearly had not read the papers.
Educate and train them along the way.
And a bit of shaming, yes. But I think
it's important though, because the meetings go for 2 or 3 hours otherwise.
Yes, yeah.
The intent of the papers and the effort that us as managers put in is to try and help the committee members have a more productive meeting. There's no members I've met who like having 2 hours or more meetings. They all like them to be as concise as possible.
And we used to have long meetings, as you know, because we had a lot on, in which case if things weren't read, it would just simply spin out the time of the meeting. So reading the papers is critical. Yeah. And this can be supplemented. If you've read the paper and have an appreciation for the topic, this can be supplemented by speaking to others in the community, which you can do as a committee member, or ex-members or lot owners or anybody that might actually give you a view that might help you form a view or form questions that need to be resolved.
That's brilliant because that brings in a lot wider perspective.
Correct.
To that committee room. It's not just the 5 or 7 people. As chairperson, you've made the effort to speak to some neighbours and you're getting a lot more collective information that they help make their
Which comes
decision.
back to you're representing the estate. They're all lot owners, not just yourself. So that's a key role of the committee member is to engage in discussions and make informed decisions. What I don't like seeing is people just making decisions.
Yeah.
They need to be informed. Yeah. There are people who will follow others, and that's fine, but it needs to be informed, I think, for it to be to hold.
Tying back to reading the information and making sure that the conversation explores the topic.
And the second item I'd advise for new committee members I'd have is don't join a committee and immediately think that you can run it. We've seen that on occasions. Others have put time and effort, often over years, on the committee. Yeah. And will know things that the new committee won't. Yeah. There are usually differing views on a topic and sometimes a deep history that needs to be appreciated. Yeah. We're dealing with something that's very personal in some regards. Do not be swayed by the loudest voice.
Dang.
Learn from others and be respectful of those who've come before you. So that's sort of saying, join a committee, bring your skills, bring your thinking, bring your challenging, and learn. Yeah. And after a year or two, then make a position. If you're happy to roll into the chair role, then that will be valued by others.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. So what we're saying is sit on the committee for at least 1 or 2 years before you consider chairperson, because you'll become aware that there's lots to know, there's lots of history there. To be an effective chairperson, you need to be mindful.
And there's dimensions. I mean, the committee I'm on at the moment, 2 of the members are pretty aggressive. And they keep on saying, well, we'll just do this. And I keep on saying, well, the law doesn't allow you to. Yeah. You've got to, that's where the balancing of the outcomes we want to get with the powers that we've got. Yeah. And there's actually quite a diversity of that. The VCAT process and others like that do not help an OC committee make decisions or enforce decisions.
And that's where the manager should be stepping up with extensive legislative experience and help guide the committee
Correct.
around their governance
Correct.
that they've got. And just a further question on the chairperson, how important is the relationship between the chairperson and the manager? We touched on that earlier. And what makes it effective in driving the committee's success?
Given it was one of my top 3 tips, it's important.
Yeah.
I think it's a critical success factor. If you don't have a good relationship, then you won't be successful as either the manager of the property or operating as the committee. I won't repeat my earlier answer, but mutually respectful working relationships is a key aspect between the chair and the OC manager. Yeah. And some OC managers are less organised than others. I've seen that. So keeping on top of things as the chair is important. I think the chair is the one who is accountable to the membership, not the OC manager. Yeah. So the chair needs to be on top of that, and at times needs to prod the OC manager to keep up with the matters that need to be progressed. Because I think it's reasonable to say that someone living, as I talked about before, living in a community understands the priorities that might be there. Something that might seem minor to an outsider, in fact, is burning to some people and needs to be progressed.
And communication is a big, I guess it's underlying what we've talked about. Communication between the chairperson and manager is just critical, isn't it, on an ongoing basis?
Ongoing basis, ongoing open basis. I mean, you need to have the mobile phone numbers of each party so you can actually do that. The tool that we used to help that was an action list, whereby rather than having minutes that record decisions and notes that these things need to be done, we consolidated them into a consolidated single action list. Yeah. And the action list would be on members of the committee, but it would be equally on the OC manager. And that way we were able to track it. We would have a date that it needed to be done. So if it wasn't a high priority, it might be next meeting or after that even. But if it was a priority, we all knew. It was an alignment of expectations through that tool.
Okay. And I think it comes down to basic goal structure, doesn't it? Having someone nominated to take a responsibility for that task and a deadline is going to get you good outcomes, isn't it?
Yes.
And it's educating that committee members as well around the accountability loop and managers, making sure they're held accountable. And if those timeframes and those persons are nominated, it helps them understand that the accountability is going to come back to you at the next meeting.
You would see squirming at the next meeting when you'd go to that item and you'd say, right, Joe, what's the update? And
hopefully they learn from that, and it's not the same.
There is an education process there, but I would, as chair, I would always communicate with someone about the actions they had leading up to the committee and saying, this is going to be asked, this is going to be discussed, are you ready?
Yeah.
And so, again, there's a chair's role as a bit of a facilitator, I think.
Yeah, sure.
To get a better outcome.
Yeah. Dave, we spoke already about fiduciary duty, so just a question to explore that a bit further. What do you feel are the best ways for a committee to approach decision-making to ensure committee members uphold their fiduciary duty? And maybe in your view, what does fiduciary duty mean from a committee member's perspective, so others know that?
Critical question, critical topic. For my mind, I'm determined that committees don't just make decisions, they make good, informed decisions. Why is that important? It's because you just make a decision, it can unwind. If someone thinks about it later on and says, well, I want to come back to that again, then you've just wasted a meeting, wasted a month or two between meetings. So the outcome has to be a good, informed decision.
Yeah.
When considering expenses, does the committee understand the need for the expense? Does it understand it's getting value for the money, for instance? There's things that are not just, here's a proposal, but what's it mean? Mm. Because if you think about it as I'm spending other people's money, that's how you should think about it. In other words, what would I be asking if it was to be that? And a good approach for each decision is be back to, as you discussed before, by a decision paper. Now, what would I have in a decision paper? It's got background, it's got the issues, it's got options, and it's got recommendations. In which case, people can understand there's no reason not to have a decision paper in the first meeting of a new committee. So I was a great believer in having the history of the previous committee available to a new member and a new committee.
Help stop the committee from zigzagging their decision making. There's some continuity.
Absolutely, and that's important.
Yeah.
And so the decision paper helps with that. This should allow members of the committee to prepare for the meeting and for making a decision ahead of the meeting and come ready to vote, or have questions or have clarifications they need. There's nothing wrong with someone having something that isn't in the decision paper answered. If it's important, that means that the decision should not be made. It should be deferred. And I think the other aspect is that a bad decision is worse than a decision. So better not to make a decision if it's a bad decision.
Yeah.
It'll only come back and be counterproductive.
Yeah.
If decisions are informed and made in good faith, meeting the committee's fiduciary duties becomes assured.
Yeah.
And what do I mean by that? Your fiduciary duty is to act in the best interests of all lot owners.
Yeah.
It's not to act in the interests of the OC manager. It's not to act in the interests of members. It's to act in the interest of all OC owners. So if you actually make a decision that is fully considered from that perspective, then I think you will have met your fiduciary duty.
It was great having David on the show today, sharing his wisdom and experiences with us. His insights into committee leadership, community engagement, and navigating challenges have been incredibly valuable. If you'd like to revisit the conversation and all the takeaways or access our other resources, please feel free to visit our website, quantumunited.com.au, or you can follow us on LinkedIn or Facebook. Thanks for joining us on Quantum Conversations. Until next time, stay inspired and work with us to continue to create vibrant and connected residential communities.